Hey guys, Foxxy here, and for today's review we have the Nyco core controller for the PS3. I have the blue version, but I believe it also comes in red or black. I picked up one of these for just under $20, but I'm sure if I shopped around I could have probably gotten it for cheaper. But before we take a look at the controller, I want to quickly show you something on the packaging that I thought was a little weird. In front here, we obviously see the controller. Now, this is the exact look of the controller you get. But when you open up the flap and look at the picture on the inside, if you look closely, and I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this, but for whatever reason, the design is a little bit different. Maybe this is a concept design or something, I don't know, but there's tiny little holes around the top and the bottom of the front of the controller. No idea why they did this, but I thought it was a little strange and worth pointing out. Anyway, enough of this, let's look at the actual product itself. As you can tell, it's a very basic wired controller that looks somewhat like the Sony DualShock. There's no gimmicks like a turbo feature or whatever with a Nyco, it's just, like I said, a basic controller. It doesn't really feel cheaply made until you mess around with some of the buttons. Like, for example, the shoulder buttons have a ton of, well, I'm not really sure what to call it, but I guess wiggle room. Like, if you place your finger on the button and move it in a circle, it's loose and just feels really poorly made. And unfortunately, it is. I was playing a shooter to test out the Nyco, and I noticed that when I was shooting with a full auto gun, it would randomly just stop. Well, it took me a while, but eventually I ended up figuring out what the problem was. If I press down the button like this, you'd assume that it's pressed all the way, right? Well, no, you have to put more pressure on the button for it to work. If they made them smaller or just better designed, then this wouldn't have been a problem. The D-pad also isn't that good. If anything, it's just a big, ugly chunk of plastic in the shape of a plus sign. They claim on the packaging that it's an extra large D-pad. This isn't true at all. It's the same size as the one on the DualShock. The only difference is the actual design of the D-pad, and the Nyco's is a little bit taller. The face buttons are alright. I kinda like the triggers on the back. They remind me of the 360s, and I enjoy using these type of triggers for racing games. Not so much for shooters or really anything else, but that's more of a personal preference. Moving on to the analogs, well, I would have to say they're on par with being as bad as the Snakebite controller. They're very stiff and the sensitivity of them is extremely touchy. But at the same time, if I slightly move the analog to turn or aim more precise, I've noticed a lot of the time it either won't do anything at all or act as if I'm pushing the analog halfway or more. I don't know the correct term that the people use. I think it's called dead zone, but I'm not entirely sure. Either way, using this controller on a first-person shooter is an absolute nightmare. Next, like I always do with my controller reviews, I'll show a little example of how the analogs are with gameplay footage using the Sony DualShock and then the Nyco, both using the same game sensitivity, by the way. As you should be able to tell, the DualShock is very smooth and fluid, and then the Nyco's is just all over the place. I could never use this for a first-person shooter because of how terrible the analogs are. Actually, I think I might do a whole separate video in the future showing whether or not third-party controllers like this have any impact at all on your accuracy. I personally think they have a giant impact, but I won't know until I decide to make the video. I also tested out the Nyco on many other games of different genres, and I found that the only games that worked well for this controller were those that didn't use the analogs for anything major. So hack and slash and action games worked fine, while racing and shooters were not so good. So here's the thing, yes, I got this controller for cheap, I understand that, but there's other controllers out there that are around the same price, but are better designed and have analogs that aren't nearly this bad. For example, those PowerA controllers cost I think around $12 at Walmart. It's far better and cheaper than the Nyco Core, so I can't recommend this at all when there's another product that is far superior and costs less. As I've said in previous reviews, most third-party controllers all seem to have problems with the analogs, whether they're too sensitive or whatever the case may be. I'm sure there's some out there that don't have these problems and are as good as the DualShock. I just haven't come across one yet. And that ends this review, guys, so thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.